What a glorious day in April 1915 to have a new single-cylinder Indian motorcycle. Brand new. Can you imagine? 3-speed transmission, 600cc engine, leaf steering, suspension in the back, super soft ride, suspended seat. Hi, I'm Mike Blode from Merced, California. I'd like to give you a tour of my 1915 single-cylinder Indian motorcycle. First, let's take a look at the engine in this motorcycle. This is a 600cc single-cylinder pushrod operated overhead valve 15 horsepower engine, which when you compare that to the modern 2-cylinder car is equal in horsepower. And when you consider this weighs about 1/5 of what the car does, that translates to a pretty powerful, fast motorcycle. Electricity is provided for the spark on this motorcycle by this Bosch EZI magneto. It's gear driven through these gears right here, and as it spins it makes a spark, and that spark comes up and operates the spark plug up here and fires the gasoline from our new larger 3-bolt carburetor. Lubrication for this engine is provided by about the 1 gallon of oil that's in this reservoir right here. It goes down through this copper line to the pressure oil pump right here, and this pump through this line supplies the oil for the crankshaft and the camshaft, and from here the adjustment here up to the overhead valves right up here. Here on the left hand side of the motorcycle is another view of our oil reservoir, and this includes a hand driven pump, and about every 5 miles I reach down and I raise this up and I give the engine an extra little burst of oil just to make sure that we've got extra lubrication down here on the crankshaft. This is our transmission. This particular year it's 3 speeds. This gives us the possibility of going almost 65 miles an hour. This is the clutch mechanism right here. It's operated by a foot pedal over here on the left hand side. This selector right here locks the shifting mechanism into the gear that you provided so that it can't jump out when you're going over bumps on rough roads. Back on the left hand side of the motorcycle, this is our clutch. It's on the left side of the transmission, and it's operated by this foot lever right here. Okay, this is our drive chain. This is the second chain on this engine. There's a primary chain that's right down inside here that drives the clutch and the transmission from the end of the crankshaft behind this cover right here. Now let's look at the suspension on this motorcycle. Starting with the seat, we have 2 generous, nice, soft, cloud-like springs, so the largest potholes just seem like a mere bump as you go over them. But in addition to that, we have a quarter-leaf spring suspension on the back and a swing arm, which they only used from 1913 to 1916. And the reason being, you'll notice the lack of shock absorbers, which meant that when you went over a bump, the energy that was imparted into these springs was put back out and bounced you right off of the seat, and it was very difficult to race these motorcycles over rough terrain. So by the end of 1916, the riders had so many difficulties with this that they eliminated the swing arm and went straight to the hardtail suspension that they kept all the way through until the late 30s. Now let's have a look at the suspension on the front of this motorcycle. It's provided by this quarter leaf spring up here. It's attached to the front forks, which are connected to the handlebars. This is all solid so far. Down here, this is a leading link front suspension, meaning that the axle is behind the pivot point here, and it's allowed to move up and down like so when you go over a bump. So the front end is not rigid at all, but it actually has a little bit of suspension. It eases out those potholes that we talked about earlier. Options for safely operating in either in town or at night. We have a headlight. The headlight is not electric. It is powered by pressurized acetylene gas, which is in this cylinder right here. Usually under normal conditions it might last 2 to 3 months, and then you would take this off and trade it for one that was filled again. You didn't fill these yourself. And it also operated through this tube. The gas would come up to the headlight. You would open the door, light the headlight with a match, close the door. This is the vent right here, so the headlight wasn't blown out when you were operating at speed. From here, the gas, the acetylene gas, travels through this tube, along the fender, up to underneath this rear taillight. You notice it's a 20th century new modern gas light taillight. You light it with a match. There's a lens here that shines the light up on your back so that people behind you can actually see a back view of you. And there's a red light on the extreme rear for safety. It's not really a horn, but it's a device that is kind of alarming, and it allows people to know that you're coming and to move out of your way. Well, let's start this bike up. There's a certain procedure that you have to observe to start any of these machines. First of all, this handle grip right here controls the advance retard mechanism on our magneto. So we start with about 1/4 of an inch of space here. Then we make sure that our throttle, and by the way, on Indian motorcycles, the throttle is on the left-hand side. These came out in 1901. Harley Davidson came out in 1903, and they put their throttle on the right. So we have 1/4 of an inch of space on our magneto. We have our throttle set at 0. We turn on the gasoline. We turn on the oil. We give it a little bit of a prime shot here. Okay, there we go. Now, in 1913 was the first year of the Kickstarter. Before that, we had a crankshaft that was started with pedals, just like on a bicycle. So, with our fuel on, our oil on, our spark in the right position, and no throttle, we get on our Kickstarter here.